In this video, I'm going to go over terms used when you meet someone who's not your relative. So, generally, we use titles and terms to refer to people that we meet. In the Hmong language, we use those, but almost exclusively they are relative terms. In the sense of terms you would refer to a relative. So when Hmong people meet each other, oftentimes one of the first things they ask is they find out how they're related to each other if they are. But what if you're not related? Or like me, you're not Hmong or married to a Hmong person or therefore related to any Hmong people. What terms would I use? What terms could you use? So, in the case that a person's not related, there are a few options based on whether you are male or female, whether the person is male or female, and their age relative to you. And we're going to go over those terms now. So, I pulled from my chart here, and we're going to start with assuming that you, the speaker, are a male. I will go over female in a minute in the same video. And we're going to assume that now you've run into a small child that is a boy. You have a couple options. One of them is to, or you could say to, adding the classifier before it, to or tutu, and that is like saying son or small boy. A slightly more affectionate term, you could call them me tu, me tu. That word me means little, so it's like saying little boy. Let's assume that you've met someone who's relatively the same age as yourself, also a male. So you're a male, you've met a male about your age ish. These terms in the chart, the ones higher in the chart are someone who's relatively older, and then as you go down on the terms, usually they get referring to someone who's younger and younger. So someone who's relatively your age but still a bit older than you, a male, you could refer to them as di lao, di lao, and that means older brother. Or you could just say di, di. It's a shortened form of the same thing. One term, and I'm not personally familiar with using this. This is based on uh, research from Gene Motton's book, White Hmong Grammar. You could say yo, yo, and that is like a way of saying, hey, old man. That's kind of sarcastic as I understand it. A few more terms, and this one I personally use often when I meet a man my age, which is mbo, mbo. Now, mbo normally, when a family term, it refers to someone who's a cousin. But when you use it for a stranger, it says like saying, "Hey, buddy," "Hey, friend," kind of along those lines. It's a very general term. Now, if that person's slightly younger than you could use tu gu, Toku, which is younger brother. And again, to the classifier you can either use or not use based on context. Another option is gu bao, which is like mixing the term cousin and younger brother to refer to someone who's like a younger cousin. But in this case, since you're not related, it'd be kind of like, hey, buddy, or friend. Now let's assume we've met a male who's significantly older than you. If he's quite a bit older, like the age of your grandfather, you would call him yo or yo law. So yo or yo law. Either of those terms you could refer to as grandfather. They're quite respectful. And in my personal opinion, yo by itself often can be used to refer to an older person. It's kind of like it's like saying Mister in English. It's a respectful term. Another option is yo lao. Yo lao, if they're a bit younger, like an older uncle, older as in older than your father would be. Another option is zi lao for older uncle. Personally, one I go to regularly, a go-to phrase for myself. If I meet an older man who's about the age of my father, I refer to him as zi nza. And that is like calling him a younger uncle. Technically, you're saying an uncle who's slightly younger than your father. But because we're not being hyper specific, I feel like it could be used in a lot of scenarios. Someone about the age of your father. Finally, calling someone 贼, 贼 is as if you were calling them your father. So it's quite intimate, an affectionate term, but not something you'd use with someone who's very much a stranger. Now let's assume that you met a little girl. You could call her 'Ntsai, 'Ntsai. You could use a classifier or not, depending on context. So 'Tu Ntsai. Or just like a boy, you could say 'Main Tsai, Main Tsai, Mei Ntsai. And that is like saying little girl because Mei means small. Now, with girls, technically you say this with young boys too, technically. But with young girls, you could call her Mai, Mai. This is a very common term. It's even a name for many people, and it's similar to the English phrase darling. And I specifically picked darling. You could say dear or sweetie or something like that. But I picked that one because if you think about with a young boy, when would you call a young boy darling if you're a man? Well, probably not at all. Maybe if they were just a toddler or younger. So that's probably the same rule you could use with the Hmong language. Whereas with a young girl, you could call her darling, an affectionate term, even if she were more than a toddler. But that gives you hopefully an idea, a gauge. Now, if you met a woman who's about your age, there's a few terms you can use, but we are approaching into dangerous waters because there are also many terms that seem innocent but could be taken as flirting, especially if she's married. So, two terms that I go to often because is, in my opinion, safe are niati, niati. This is what you'd call your sister-in-law. So in a sense, you're saying, and that specifically, you would refer to the sister of your older brother. I'm sorry. So specifically, we be referring to the wife of your older brother. So you would use this with a person, a woman about your age, but maybe a bit older than you. And the reason I feel it's safe is because it's kind of like assuming she's married. So you're not implying anything that she's single or available. Also, there's 年长, and that's what you would call your younger brother's wife. And therefore, again, it's like someone who's a woman your age, but maybe a bit younger than you. Now, there's some other terms. For example, 靓模, 靓模. That's calling someone a term, even if they're not related to you, it's calling them sister. It's it's in a sense implying that they're not married. So if they were married, it could be very offensive to the husband. And the classifier leng is even more somewhat affectionate term referring to human beings, or it's somewhat closer. So uh, use with caution. Tu moi, tu moi. Just as the only difference is the classifier is a little bit what you just call your sister in general, or it's a little less close than leng, but still could be considered dangerous. And now, if the person is a bit younger than you, maybe like if it were me, if I were to meet someone who's maybe like a teenager, young adult, I might call them Tsai or Dun Tsai, like daughter. Now, if you were to meet an older woman, you could call her Ba if she's a grandmother. Kind of a middle ground phrase if she's somewhere between grandma and older aunt is Nietai, Nietai. And one phrase I've heard it's said that it could be considered somewhat more intimate or affectionate is Pao, Pao, and that's a word for aunt. She's a bit younger. You could call her Nia Law, Nia Law. And then again, Nia is like calling someone mother. So it would be something that's very intimate or affectionate. So you wouldn't, again, call that to a perfect stranger, but maybe someone you're close to who's about that age, is the age of your own mother. Now, let's assume that you, the speaker, are a woman. What are the phrases that you would use? Well, if you met a young boy, the phrases are more or less the same. So you could say tu tu. You could say without the classifier, just tu. Or you could say me tu, and that's boy, small boy, or son. Now, if you meet a man about your age, there are a few different phrases you can use. So, for example, you can call him da lo, which is kind of like saying uncle. Uh, it's a somewhat distant phrase in the sense that it probably won't be considered flirting. Or yo da is another option around the same area or same way. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, Lang no is like calling him your brother. Again, it uses the somewhat closer classifier for human beings called Lang. So it could be considered flirting, especially if that person is married. But it is implying that they're available in a sense. And then no or to no is another term for brother, but not quite as intimate as Lang no. Now, if you met an older man, significantly older, if he was about the age of your grandfather, you could call him yo or yo law. So again, yo law. If they were a bit younger than that, you could say yo law. Or if they were about the age of your father, you could also call him zin zao, zi zao. If you were to meet a young girl, a small girl, you could call her cai or dun cai or main cai. Main Thai. Or again, just like discussed before, you could refer to her as my, like young darling. I've heard mothers refer to their sons about that age, even when they're a bit older, as my, because you think about it, a mother would call their son darling. But if you're a male, you probably can't get away with that as much. It might seem strange. If you met a woman the same age as you, roughly, if she was a bit older, you could call her Niet Lao. That's older sister. Or you could call her, if she was a bit younger than you could call her Niet Lua. Niet Lua. Another term that's very general and kind of unique for when women are referring to women is Vi Jiao. Vi Jiao. This term, in my opinion, is usually used when referring in the third person. So, not when you're speaking directly to someone, but when you're speaking about someone, saying, "This is my sister, this is my friend." I don't think that's a strict rule, just my observation personally. But Vinjiao can refer to someone as a sister, like a relative, or just a friend. Or you could say Jiao Vinjiao is like the sisters or the ladies, the friends. It's more general, but it's very useful when referring to other women. You're roughly the same age. Finally, if you meet an older woman, you're a woman, you meet an older woman, she's very old, like your grandmother, you could say Pa. If she's a bit younger than that, you can call her Nietai or Pao for aunt. Again, I've heard Pao is a bit more intimate or more affectionate, I should say, but I don't think it's rude. So, just to conclude, what can we do to learn these terms? Obviously, there's quite a few. Well, you can practice with flashcards. That's very effective. Once you get these terms in your mind with flashcards, it's very helpful when you meet someone, whether they're Hmong or not. Just try to think of how you would refer to them if you weren't related to them. What is the term that you would use to call them? And that can help embed it into your mind. So, as always, I hope that helps, and I'll see you in the next video.